Welcome to Vixen's Story. If you are a fan of creepy, mysterious stories, and the dark spiritual world, then you have come to the right place. My channel will take you on adventures to haunted places, explore horror legends, and experience your deepest fears together. Prepare yourself, turn off the lights, and listen to some truly terrifying ghost stories. True horror story. Nightmare in the Deep Woods. In the fall of 2010, the National Forest in Oregon was covered in bright yellow and red. But the air was chilly and eerily quiet. Ava Carter, a young artist looking for peace and inspiration for her new collection of paintings, rented a small cabin deep in the woods, about 10 miles from the nearest town. She loved the isolation, believing it would help her focus and inspire her most unique artistic ideas. "I'm finally here," Ava muttered to herself as she drove her old car along the bumpy dirt road. The tall trees covering both sides of the road forming a dark tunnel. She felt a little nervous, but the excitement of being alone in the wild nature overwhelmed everything. When Ava arrived at the cabin, it was already dark. The house looked old and creepy, with rotten wooden boards and small dark windows. She unlocked the creaky wooden door and stepped inside. The house was smaller than she expected, with just a living room with a fireplace, a small bedroom, and a simple kitchen. The smell of mold and rotting wood hit her nose. "It's okay, Ava," she told herself, trying to dispel the unease that was creeping up inside her. She turned on the lights, a weak yellow light illuminating the room, revealing the old and dusty furniture. After unpacking and preparing a simple dinner, Ava sat down by the fireplace with her sketchbook. She began to draw, but the lines still weren't quite smooth. She felt a little tired from the long trip. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise coming from outside, like a branch breaking under someone's feet. Ava listened, startled, her heart beating faster. She looked out the window, but it was pitch black outside, and she couldn't see anything. It must be some animal, she reassured herself, but the feeling of unease didn't go away. As night fell, the forest became eerily quiet. Ava lay in bed, unable to sleep. She kept hearing strange noises coming from outside. Sometimes the rustling of leaves, sometimes the breaking of branches, and sometimes the howling of an animal in the distance. Suddenly, she heard a very faint sound, as if someone was walking very lightly outside her bedroom. Ava sat up in surprise. Listening, the sound rang out again, this time clearer, like footsteps on wet ground. She felt a cold fear spread throughout her body. Ava tiptoed out of bed, went to the window, and opened the curtains to look outside. The dim moonlight shone down on the forest, creating strange shadows. She couldn't see anyone, but she still felt like someone was nearby, watching her. Suddenly, she saw a dark figure pass by the window, very quickly, but she was sure she wasn't mistaken. The shadow was tall and thin, and it moved very lightly, as if gliding through the air. Ava felt a terrible fear. She knew that she was not alone in this wooden house. The next morning, Ava woke up feeling tired and anxious. She decided to take a walk in the forest to relieve some of the tension. When she stepped out of the house, she noticed strange footprints on the wet ground around the house. These footprints were much larger than hers, and they seemed to circle the house. Ava felt a surge of unease in her heart. She knew that last night wasn't just her imagination. Someone was outside the house, watching her. While Ava was walking in the woods, she suddenly saw something strange on a nearby tree trunk. It was a photo, pinned to the tree trunk with a small knife. Ava timidly approached and took the photo down. It was a photo of her, taken from behind. When she was walking in the woods the day before, Ava was horrified to realize that someone had been following her since before she came to this cabin. The fear in her heart rose to its peak. She knew that she was in danger. Ava hurriedly ran back to the cabin, locking all the doors and windows. She felt like someone was right behind her, stalking and watching her every move. She crouched in a chair by the fireplace, holding her cell phone tightly in her hand, ready to call for help at any moment. But she knew that, in this remote place, no one would come in time to help her. She felt completely alone and helpless, faced with an invisible hunter, lurking in the darkness of the forest. Ava clutched the photo to her chest, her heart pounding as if it would burst out of her chest. A picture of herself, taken from behind, pinned to a tree trunk with a sharp knife. It was more than a cruel prank. It was a chilling threat. Fear coursed through her body, numbing her limbs. "No, it can't be," she whispered, her voice choked with terror. Someone was watching her, stalking her every second. The peace she had sought had turned into a terrifying prison, and the lush forest around her a deadly maze. Ava rushed into the house, slamming the door shut and locking it. She leaned against the door, breathing steadily to calm herself. She needed to call for help, but when she looked at her cell phone, she realized there was no signal. "Fuck," she cursed under her breath, feeling isolated and helpless. She tried to remember if anyone had told her about the poor cell phone reception in the area, but her mind was blank with fear. She was completely cut off from the outside world, all alone facing the mysterious pursuer. Ava decided to protect herself. She walked around the house, checking all the windows and doors, making sure they were locked. She pulled the curtains down, trying to block any view from the outside. She searched the house for anything that could be used as a weapon. In the kitchen, she found a rather large kitchen knife and a dry wood stick next to the fireplace. She held the knife tightly in her hand, feeling a little relieved, but her fear did not subside. She knew that a small knife was no match for someone with bad intentions. As Ava sat curled up in the armchair by the fireplace, trying to stay awake, she heard strange noises coming from outside. There was the rustling of leaves, the snapping of branches, and the faint sound of footsteps on the ground. She listened, startled, her heart pounding. Suddenly, she heard another noise, this time from inside the house, a faint sound of footsteps in the attic. Ava felt a chill run down her spine. She was sure the attic was empty. She had never been there before. What was that noise? Maybe the hunter was already inside the house? A memory flashed through Ava's mind. Before coming here, she had told a close friend named Liam about this trip. Liam had been a little jealous that she would be spending some quiet time alone in the woods. He had made some insinuations, seemed displeased. "Don't forget about me," he had said with a strange smile. Ava shivered. Had Liam followed her here? Was he capable of doing something like this? The thought made her feel both scared and incredulous. Liam had always seemed like a good friend, but sometimes he acted and said strange things. Ava decided that she couldn't just sit in this house forever. She needed to find a way to contact the outside world, or at least find the nearest town to ask for help. She opened the door cautiously, looked around, and quickly stepped outside. The forest was as silent and eerie as the night before, but the light of day made her feel a little more secure. She walked along the dirt road, trying to walk as fast as she could, always alert to every sound and movement around her. The feeling of being watched didn't go away, as if there were invisible eyes following her every step. When Ava had gone about half a mile, she saw an old pickup truck approaching. An older man, dressed in a work uniform, was driving. Ava waved, hoping that the man could help her. The car stopped, and the man rolled down the window, looking at Ava curiously. "Little girl, what's wrong? You seem to be in a panic." Ava quickly told the man what had happened, about the strange noises, the shadow, and the photo. The man frowned, his expression slightly suspicious. "Little girl, there are sometimes strange people around here. Maybe you're just a little nervous." As Ava tried to convince the man, she suddenly saw something reflecting the sunlight on the back of the truck. It was a small knife, exactly like the one that had pinned her photo to the tree. The man seemed to notice Ava's gaze. The friendly smile on his face disappeared, replaced by a cold, scary look. "Little girl," he said, his voice low, "you saw something you shouldn't have." Before Ava could react, the man jumped out of the car, a shiny knife in his hand, and rushed towards her. Ava screamed in terror and ran for her life into the deep woods, the heavy footsteps of her pursuer echoing right behind her. Ava rushed deeper into the woods, dry branches brushing against her face and arms, tearing her thin shirt. Her gasps mingled with the rustling of leaves under her feet, and the heavy footsteps followed right behind her. Terror drove her to run faster, but the dense forest was like a maze, the tall trees blocking out the sunlight, creating dark shadows, making it difficult for her to find her bearings. "I have to get away from him," Ava thought, tears streaming down her mud-stained face. She didn't dare look back, just kept running, hoping to find a safe hiding place. Ava tripped over a protruding root, falling to the ground. The sharp pain in her ankle almost made her cry out. She quickly got up, fighting the pain, and continued running. She looked around, trying to find somewhere to hide. Ahead of her was a thick clump of bushes. Ava decided to crawl into them, hoping to distract her pursuer. She weaved through the sharp branches, trying not to make a sound. Once deep inside the bushes, she lay down on the ground, holding her breath and listening. The heavy footsteps continued to grow closer. The pursuer did not give up. "Ava, you can't escape," the deep voice echoed in the forest, carrying a sickening pleasure. "I know where you are." Ava shivered. She tried to shrink herself, praying that he wouldn't find her. The smell of cheap cigarettes wafted through the air, the distinctive smell of the man driving the pickup truck. He was very close. Suddenly, Ava heard the sound of running water in the distance. She realized that she was near a small stream. A thought flashed through her mind. If she waded across the stream, perhaps the water would wash away her tracks. She carefully crawled out of the bushes and ran towards the stream. The cold water made her shiver, but she still tried to wade through, holding on to the slippery rocks to keep her balance. Once she reached the other side, she continued running deeper into the forest. While running away, Ava suddenly remembered a time when she and Liam had gone hiking together in this area. Liam was very familiar with this forest. He knew every trail and secret shortcut. A terrible doubt rose in Ava's heart. Could Liam be the one who was hunting her? Could his jealousy turn into such a sick obsession? The thought made her feel both scared and hurt. She didn't want to believe that the friend she once trusted could do such terrible things. Ava stopped, trying to catch her breath. She looked around, realizing that she was in a rather unfamiliar area. She was lost. Suddenly, she saw something flash in a nearby bush. She timidly approached and saw a broken cell phone, the screen still showing the wallpaper of her and Liam smiling. Ava felt a chill down her spine. This phone was definitely Liam's, so he was the one chasing her. A loud noise rang out right behind Ava, causing her to turn around in surprise. Liam was standing there, just a few meters away, still holding the small knife in his hand. His face was twisted with anger and jealousy, his eyes looking at her with a terrifying gaze. "I finally found you, Ava," he said, his voice hoarse and threatening. "You think you can escape me? You are mine, and I will never let anyone else have you." Ava knew that she could not run away anymore. She had to face Liam. She looked straight into his eyes, trying to appear strong even though she was trembling inside. "Liam, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this?" Liam sneered, a cold and terrifying smile. "Why? Because I love you, Ava, but you don't love me. You always look at other men. You always smile at them. I can't stand it. If I can't have you, then no one can." He raised the knife, his eyes filled with madness. Ava screamed in horror, knowing that this could be the last moment of her life. Ava stood frozen, staring at the shining knife in Liam's hand. The sheer fear made her speechless. She tried to back away, but her back hit a large tree trunk, leaving no way to retreat. "Liam, what's wrong with you?" Ava asked, her voice trembling. She tried to look into his eyes, searching for any trace of the friend she once knew, but saw only a blank, hateful gaze. Liam sneered, a twisted, terrifying smile. "What's wrong with me? You're driving me crazy, Ava." He took a step towards her, the blade of the knife vibrating slightly. "You're always ignoring me, always looking at other guys. I love you, Ava. I love you more than anything in this world. Why can't you love me?" His voice became choked, but his eyes were still full of menace. "I've been watching you, Ava. I know everything you do. Everywhere you go. I can't let anyone else have you." "Liam, you're mistaken," Ava tried to say, her voice pleading. "We're just friends. I've never meant anything else to you." She tried to keep her voice calm, not wanting to agitate him further. "Please put the knife down. We can talk, work things out." But Liam didn't seem to hear. He was still looking at her with haunted eyes. Suddenly, Liam lunged at Ava, knife raised. Ava screamed in horror, quickly dodging to the side. The blade grazed her cheek, leaving a burning cut. Ava felt blood running down. She knew she had to defend herself. She quickly picked up a large rock at her feet and threw it at Liam. The rock hit him in the chest, causing him to take a step back, clutching his chest and groaning. This was her chance. Ava ran away in a hurry, rushing deeper into the forest. She heard Liam growling angrily behind her, but she didn't dare to look back. She ran at full speed, ignoring the branches tearing at her skin, ignoring the increasingly severe pain in her ankle. She had only one thought in her mind: to survive. Liam didn't give up easily. He quickly chased after Ava, his heavy footsteps echoing in the forest. "You can't escape, Ava. I'll find you," he shouted. Carrying madness and despair, he ran hopelessly, no longer caring about anything. Jealousy had completely taken over his mind. While running away, Ava saw a steep slope ahead, leading to a deep abyss. She hesitated for a moment, but had no other choice. She decided to risk climbing down the slope, hoping to lose Liam. She carefully clung to the roots and rocks, slowly climbing down. The slope was slippery and dangerous. Just a little mistake and she could fall into the abyss. As Ava neared the bottom of the slope, she heard Liam's footsteps right above her. He had seen her. "No way, Ava," he shouted, his voice full of triumph. Liam started to climb down the slope, but he was in a hurry and not as careful as Ava. Suddenly, he slipped and fell, rolling down the abyss. Ava watched in horror. Then she heard a loud noise from below, followed by a terrifying silence. Liam had fallen into the abyss. Ava stood there, trembling, not knowing what would happen next. She had escaped Liam, but she was still trapped in this wild forest. Alone and injured, Ava stood on the edge of the cliff, looking down into the darkness where Liam had fallen. An eerie silence filled the forest, save for the sound of rain pattering on the leaves. She didn't know if Liam was alive or dead, but the thought of what he had tried to do made her shiver. The sharp pain in her ankle reminded her of her own situation. She was injured, alone, and lost in the wilderness. "I have to go," Ava told herself, trying to shake off the numbness that was spreading through her body. She needed to find safety, or at least a path out of the woods. Ava carefully followed the slope, trying to find an easier way down. The terrain was treacherous. Slippery rocks and jagged tree roots made every step difficult. The pain in her ankle was getting worse, forcing her to grit her teeth and bear it. She held on to dry branches to keep her balance, slowly climbing down. When she reached the bottom of the slope, she felt exhausted and in pain. She sat down on a large rock, trying to temporarily bandage the wound on her ankle, using a piece of cloth torn from her shirt. As Ava was resting, she heard strange noises coming from deep in the forest. It was not the chirping of birds or the blowing of wind, but a very faint rustling, as if someone was moving lightly among the bushes. Ava listened, startled, her heart beating faster. She felt someone was watching her, hiding in the darkness of the forest. Was it Liam, still alive and searching for her? Or was there some other danger lurking in this forest? The loneliness and fear began to wear on Ava's spirit. Sometimes, she felt like she could hear Liam calling out to her from afar, whispering words full of resentment and threats. She wondered if she was hallucinating. What had happened was too horrible. It was beyond her endurance. She tried to dispel the dark thoughts, focusing on finding a way out of the forest. After a while of walking with difficulty, Ava suddenly saw a small, faint trail appearing in front of her. A glimmer of hope flashed in her heart. Perhaps this path would lead her to a safe place, to a house or a town. She carefully walked on the trail, trying to follow the faint traces. Although she was very tired and in pain, she still tried to walk as fast as possible, hoping to be able to escape this scary forest soon. As Ava was walking along the trail, she suddenly saw something strange on the ground. It was an old leather wallet, abandoned by the side of the road. Ava timidly picked up the wallet and opened it. Inside, she found a few old bills and a driver's license. The name on the driver's license was Liam Walker. Ava's spine was cold. This wallet was Liam's. That meant he was still alive and had passed through this path. Fear surged through her again, stronger than ever. A painful memory rushed into Ava's mind. She remembered the times Liam had shown unreasonable jealousy, the angry looks and harsh words he had given her. She had ignored those signs, thinking it was just a temporary impulse. But now, she realized that Liam's jealousy had eaten into his mind, turning him into a completely different person. She had been too blind to realize it. As Ava was lost in her chaotic thoughts, she suddenly heard a very faint noise behind her. She quickly turned around and was horrified to see Liam standing right behind her, his face covered in blood and dirt, but his eyes still shining with anger and obsession. He was still alive, and he had found her. "You think you can escape me, Ava?" Liam said, his voice hoarse and threatening, the small knife still in his hand. Ava screamed in horror, knowing that her life or death fight was not over yet. After Liam's strong blow, Ava lay motionless on the cold ground, trying to catch her last breaths. Liam was struggling to get up, his face contorted in pain. Suddenly, a tall figure emerged from the darkness, swinging a thick piece of wood at Liam. There was a terrifying bang, and Liam fell down, unconscious. Ava watched in horror as the figure approached, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Who was this? Who was this person? The figure bent down to look at Ava, and when the dim light illuminated his face, Ava couldn't believe her eyes. It was Mark, her college roommate, whom she hadn't seen in years. His face, once gentle and kind, was now distorted and terrifying, his eyes shining with a strange light, a mixture of anger and a sick obsession. Mark, what are you doing? Ava stuttered, her voice trembling. Mark looked at Ava, a cold smile on his lips. I was just protecting you, Ava, he said, his voice chillingly soft. Liam doesn't deserve you. He's just a stalker. I'm the one who truly loves you. The one who watches over you and protects you. Ava shivered. She remembered her college days, when Mark had always been overly attentive to her, always jealous of any boy who approached her, especially Liam, with whom she had a close friendship. A memory suddenly flooded Ava's mind. One evening, while she and Liam were studying together in their dorm room, Mark had barged in, screaming and accusing Liam of trying to seduce her. At the time, she had thought it was just Mark being a little too aggressive. But now she realized it was a sign of a dangerous obsession. I told you, Ava, Mark continued, his voice becoming harsher. You belong to me alone. No one else has the right to touch you. Liam groaned and slowly opened his eyes. He saw Mark standing over Ava, and horror was written all over his face. Mark, you're crazy? Liam tried to sit up, but Mark quickly kicked him in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground, gasping for air. You're the crazy one, Liam, Mark hissed. You're thinking about Ava. You're going to pay. Mark turned back to Ava, his eyes possessive. I had to do a lot to get here, Ava, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if revealing a dark secret. I had to eliminate those who stood in our way. People like Liam and others. Ava realized in horror. Mark was the one who had followed her, who had pinned the picture to the tree. And perhaps, he had done even worse. Mark slowly walked towards Ava, a piece of wood in his hand. Ava tried to crawl back, but her back hit a large rock. She was completely trapped. Don't be afraid, Ava, Mark said, his voice eerily gentle. We'll be together forever. No one will ever tear us apart again. He raised the piece of wood high, ready to strike. Ava closed her eyes, waiting for the worst. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out. Not from Mark, but from behind him. Another dark figure appeared, charging at Mark with a ferocious roar. It was a large bear, probably awakened by the noise and the smell of blood. Mark screamed in terror, dropping the piece of wood and trying to fight back. But the bear was too strong. It tackled him to the ground and began to attack savagely. Ava opened her eyes, horrified to see the horror unfolding before her. Liam was still lying motionless, and Mark was being torn apart by the bear. Ava knew she had to run immediately, or she would be next. Ava stood frozen, her eyes wide with horror as she watched the bear tear Mark apart. The beast's ferocious growls echoed throughout the forest, mixed with the terrifying sound of bones breaking. Blood splattered all over Ava. The pungent smell rushed straight into her nose, making her stomach churn. She couldn't move, frozen in place, only able to stare at the terrifying scene before her eyes. Mark, her pursuer, had now become prey to another danger. A horrifying irony. Suddenly, the bear raised its head, its dark brown fur covered in blood. It turned its small, jet-black eyes toward Ava, as if it had sensed her presence. A deep growl came from its throat. Then it slowly stood up, its large and powerful body appearing under the dim moonlight. Ava knew that she was the next target. Extreme fear filled her mind, making her unable to think of anything else. Only her survival instinct told her to run away. Ava quickly turned and ran, rushing deeper into the darkness of the forest. The bear's growls echoed behind her. Each of its heavy footsteps seemed to want to catch up with her. Ava ran at full speed, ignoring the branches that tore at her skin, ignoring the sharp pain in her ankle. She didn't dare to look back, only knowing to run, hoping to find a safe hiding place. She heard the rustling of dry leaves under the bear's feet, the sound getting closer and closer, making her heart feel like it was choking. While running away, Ava tripped over a tree root and fell to the ground. The sharp pain in her ankle made her cry out. She tried to stand up, but her leg hurt so much that she couldn't stand. She looked around, trying to find somewhere to hide. In front of her was a large rock, with a small hole underneath. Ava quickly crawled inside, crouching down, holding her breath and listening. The bear's growls were still echoing somewhere nearby, but it seemed like it had lost sight of her. Ava sat still in the hole, trying to calm herself. She could hear the rain pattering on the leaves, and the wind whistling through the branches. The space around her was pitch black, with only a few weak rays of moonlight filtering through the leaves. She felt cold and painful, but at least she was temporarily safe. She thought about Liam, wondering if he was still alive. She felt a little guilty for leaving him, but she knew that if she went back, they would probably both die. After a long wait, Ava decided to keep going. She couldn't stay here forever. She carefully crawled out of the hole, trying to be as quiet as possible so as not to make any noise. She followed the trail, trying to find any trace of civilization. The forest was still quiet and scary, but now her fear of the bear had somewhat overshadowed her fear of Mark. At least the bear was a natural danger. But Mark, he was something much more terrifying. After hours of exhausting walking, Ava finally saw lights in the distance. She tried to run faster, despite the pain in her legs. As she got closer, she realized it was a small ranger station. She rushed to it, banged on the door, and shouted for help. The ranger opened the door, looking at Ava with surprise and concern. She told him everything that had happened. The ranger quickly called to report the incident, and took Ava inside for care. A few days later, Ava had recovered and returned home. Liam had been found dead at the bottom of the cliff, and Mark's body was still in the woods. The investigation concluded that Mark was the stalker, and that his motive was sick jealousy. Ava tried to forget what had happened, but the terrifying memories of the Oregon forest would forever haunt her. Every night, she felt like there was a dark shadow lurking outside her window, and the sound of dry leaves rustling under someone's feet would still echo in her dreams. The forest had given her life back, but it also carried a terror that would never fade. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you want to challenge your nerves further, subscribe to the channel to continue discovering other horror mysteries.